Good morning. This is Pastor Paul. I'm doing my weekly podcast here at Riverside Park Church of God. I'm glad that you've decided to join us for this. Today, I'm going to be talking about a question that the Bible spends a good amount of time answering, and the question comes in a parable form from Jesus. But there was a guy, a real guy, that approached Jesus one day, and he said this. He said, Lord, and Jesus before this had been talking to the guy about what should your response be to other people when they have need. And so in their conversation, they just they concluded that you should always help your neighbor. And so the question that the guy asked the Lord after that was, well, Lord, who is my neighbor? If I'm supposed to help my neighbor, if I'm supposed to, reach out to my neighbor, then who is my neighbor? And the guy asked Jesus this because he was trying to justify himself. In other words, he was trying to quantify who do I really have to help and who do I not have to help. He was trying to get an answer from the Lord that would kind of make it easier for him to help people. And so Jesus, when he asked them, who is my neighbor, Jesus gave the man the parable. And what we call this parable in the church or in Sunday school is the story of the Good Samaritan. Now, I'm sure a lot of you have heard the story of the Good Samaritan, but this is the parable that Jesus gave in response to the question, Lord, who is my neighbor? Think about it. Before I read the parable, think about it in your life. Who is your neighbor? Who are we really called to help? Who do we see in our daily lives that has a need that we're called to help or called to assist? Um, and so I think Jesus makes it clear in the story. And so I'm going to read through the story, then at the end share a little personal story that I think ties in. I'm reading from the Gospel of Luke in the 10th chapter. And I won't go over all the preliminary conversation that Jesus had. So I'm just going to jump in around verse 29. And this is what the Lord said, or this is what the Bible reads. But the man, he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, who is my neighbor? In reply, Jesus said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he fell into the hands of robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, they beat him, and they went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey and took him to an inn and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 silver coins and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expenses you may have. So then now Jesus asked this man this question. Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? The expert in the law replied, and that was the man, the one who had mercy on him. And so Jesus told him, go and do likewise. Now, the question that Jesus asked the man at the end of the parable is really an obvious, which of the 3 do you think was the neighbor to him? And the man correctly says, well, the guy who had pity on him, the guy who took mercy on him and actually helped him. And that's so true. I mean, we teach this in our Sunday school classes to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 year olds, and we expect them to understand it, and they do. Simply put, The guy who was the neighbor was the guy who actually stopped and helped the man. And if you recall from the story, you know the religious guy, I'll say it that way, passed by on this side because he had to get to church, and the other guy passed by on the other side because he had legal stuff to do. But the guy that helped him was a Samaritan. And that's kind of curious because Samaritans were viewed by a lot of people in the Holy Land at the time of this parable as being like half people. The Samaritans were looked down upon as being dogs and being like the refuse of society. So they didn't have good standing at all. And it's interesting that in the story, it's the Samaritan that actually reaches out to the guy. Um, and so Jesus not only says, our neighbor, I think I'm going to give the answer here. Not only does Jesus say our neighbor is really everyone that has need, but he also puts a little twist on this story by saying it was a Samaritan that actually helped this guy. That just wouldn't have happened. So Jesus really is making a dual point. We are to help our neighbor, who is everybody, but also it doesn't matter on ethnicity, it doesn't matter on gender, it doesn't matter on social status, race, anything. We're just called to help each other, help our neighbor. Just a quick story. I I live in a subdivision, and I live across the street from an elderly couple. And now, the man has passed away some years ago, and the widow is left living there, and she's got daughters that comes and check on her and stuff like that. So, and this was, I'm going to say 10 years ago now. I was having, I think I was having a Thanksgiving party at my house, and the woman came across the street and she knocked on my door and she said, "Paul, my husband has fallen." And his name is Mike, and she goes, "Mike fell. I can't get him up. Would you come help get him up?" Sure, and so I went over there. I think, one of my brother-in-laws came with me, and we helped him up. And if that was Thanksgiving, it seemed like the next gathering I was doing Christmas at my house, and it just happened to be I got another knock on the door, and it was the same lady, and she said, "Oh, I'm so sorry to bother you, but Mike fell again." And so we went and we picked him up. And it seemed to be, it was becoming almost a weekly thing where I would get a knock on the door and she would say, "Oh, I'm so sorry, Mike fell again." And he kept falling. Well, Mike ended up getting diagnosed with full-blown Parkinson's, and about maybe a year after that, he was completely bedridden. And so after about a year, when he was bedridden, she came back across the street and she said, "Paul, would you, I'm going to do all I can to help keep my husband home while he passes. Would you help me by every morning coming across and helping me get him out of bed, helping me clean him up and get him out of bed?" I said, "Oh, sure." So uh, that week I started doing it on a daily basis. Well, that turned into, I think I think I'm correct to say, almost 5 years. Mike, lingered, and I literally went over there every day to get him out of bed, to help his wife get him out of bed. And there were a lot of mornings, and I don't know how I can say this other than he had messed himself at night, and so getting him out of bed kind of turned into, we have to change his clothes, we have to wash him up from his mistakes, his accidents, and it was really, really gross work, and I just kept going over there. Well, the reason I'm sharing this is not to draw attention to myself. The reason I'm sharing the story is, in the interim, in that 5-year period, it seemed like everybody in my life was telling me, "You're crazy. You shouldn't be going over there lifting him. you shouldn't, what if you drop him? They're going to get a lawsuit on you. And what if this happens? And what if you did something the wrong way and he broke a bone? Or, you're going to be liable, and you should leave that to the professionals. And it just seemed like everybody who got to know what I was doing was kind of coming against me. And I was like, oh no, in my heart, I gotta help this guy. I gotta help this lady. And so in time, Mike passed away, and we did the funeral and all, and the wife, she was so grateful, and she couldn't give me gobs of money and all that. So she just would, and she gave me this really beautiful card. I just wanted to say thank you. And the daughters, they got to know me, and they just wanted to thank me, and some of the grandkids and all that. And I share that story to say this. Kind of like the Good Samaritan, I didn't know, unbeknownst to me, she had gone to all the other neighbors, and they had said, no, I don't want it, no, I don't want to get involved in that, it could turn out bad. And again, not to draw attention to myself, I felt impelled to help because here was a fellow human being that needed help. But not only that, nobody else seemed to want to help. Folks, sometimes in our lives, I think God burdens our heart. I really believe God puts something on us that he doesn't put the burden on everybody else. And he's calling us to get involved. He's calling us to roll up our sleeves and get dirty. He's calling us, to walk across the street or to take care of people. And I think in my situation, I don't think God put that burden on everybody. For whatever reason, the Lord put it on my heart. And I think the same goes for you. In our daily travels and what we do, we work, and in our recreation, in our home life, look for those opportunities where the Lord might be laying something on your heart to do to help somebody. And it could be that he's just laying it on your heart because he wants you to learn the lesson of servanthood. He wants you to be the one that has to learn to give up his time, his money, and to go help others. And I think you'll find it is the most rewarding, beautiful thing you can do when you've helped somebody, when you've put yourself aside and sacrificially helped somebody. I think that's the story of the Good Samaritan. So in closing, when Jesus says, "Who is my neighbor?" I think the Good Samaritan tells it. My little story tells it. The Good Samaritan, who is my neighbor? First off, my neighbor is everybody. And who is the Good Samaritan? I think you and I are. I think we are. We're called to do acts of service towards others. And so I just want to encourage you, if the Lord has put something on your heart like that, just go do it. You'll find it to be a wonderfully rewarding thing. Having said that, that's the close of this week's podcast. I hope you join me again next Friday. We seem to be getting on a schedule where we're going to do this every Friday, and I look forward to it. The technician looks forward to it, and so I hope you as well do. Until then, God bless you. Let the Lord shine upon you and give you a great day. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you.